Hey guys, and welcome back to the Small Music Artist Type podcast. Had some issues in the background as always, but never mind all that crazy. Let's jump right into the episode. Today we're bringing GOOGGZ back onto this podcast for the first time in well over a year. If you didn't listen to that episode way back in season 1, don't worry, I'll be introducing them again. GOOGGZ has been creating wonderful music in this industry for about 4 years now. Their first single, Man's Best Friend, was released in late 2020 and kickstarted GOOGGZ's music career. A couple weeks before GOOGGZ was originally brought onto this podcast, they did a dramatic change in branding and introduced a brand character named Crystal. Now, many people will call GOOGGZ Crystal due to her huge influence in the community, but don't mind that. With this brand change came a change in GOOGGZ's music style to something that GOOGGZ called Crystal House, a unique style that had the exact feeling that the name describes. Though now, GOOGGZ is writing whatever comes to mind, which includes some more of a orchestral influence in the newest singles. GOOGGZ just released a new song after quite some time of silence, Be Not Afraid, which even with low promo before its release has been taken well by GOOGGZ's fans. You can find GOOGGZ on all streaming platforms, and of course, I'll have everything in description for y'all to look at after this podcast is over. Now, let's get started with the interview portion so y'all can get to know GOOGGZ a little better. Hi GOOGGZ, or as I've been calling you, Crystal. Welcome back. If there's anything you'd like to say to the few people who listen to this podcast, go right ahead.
You know, it's funny. I didn't expect to be brought back on because I've kind of been dormant, so to speak, for the past almost a year now. After I went on hiatus for 9 months due to just family reasons and not releasing a lot. The last person I expected you to reach out to was me. So that's really the only comment I have is just I'm surprised, if anything, that you reached out to what was essentially a dead brand for the time being.
Alrighty, let's get started with the interview. Question 1. How would you describe your current music style?
I would describe my music as experimental or having no style in particular. And I don't mean that in the traditional sense of, I'm trying things and making things that have never been done before. I mean that more as I myself am experimenting with things that I have never done before. So are there aspects that, to my knowledge, haven't been done before? Yeah, there's a few. But for the most part, it's just me trying to push myself. I've always put myself in a box. It's me trying to push myself out of the box and just say, you know what? Yeah, this isn't what I typically do. Why do I care? Push for something a bit more extreme, a bit more unique, something not as many people would think about or expect. And so when it comes to stylization, it's kind of just chaos, to be fair. But controlled chaos, and just kind of figuring out how to control that and how to make something sound unanimous while also, complex and interesting.
Question 2. About 2 years ago, you started using this brand character, Crystal. How has Crystal impacted your fans and your community?
Crystal came about from about a year of design. And she kind of evolved over time. She originally was meant to be a man, actually. That was the original design for Crystal. And when I was making her, I was trying to come up with some form of an image that fit my music, the mysteriousness behind it and all that. And all of the male designs that I ended up coming up with ended up looking like something out of some weird half-assed cartoon. It looked dumb. And then I was just like, I'll try, a female character. And it was the first thing it hit. And it was like, that's perfect. That's it. Now, she's gone through a lot of changes since then. But for the most part, the stylization is still there as it was that first time. I struck gold, in my opinion. And in terms of changing my community, it kind of put a face to my brand because I did show my face from time to time, and I certainly did interact with people, but it wasn't a common thing, and it certainly wasn't something that I had any plans on doing more frequently. So it gave my community a bit of a face, and you can see that in a lot of different artists, from pegboard nerds to Excision to Yuli. All of these DJs and whatnot all have characters, and they're just brand faces. They're just brand heads, and that was kind of the change I was looking for. Now, what's interesting about Crystal is my community has reacted amazingly to her, and for some reason she's become a bit of her own character, separated from me in some ways, which is cool to see. Very, very cool to see, but interesting to see where the community is kind of taking her, as I've kind of let go of her development, and they're kind of doing that now for me. It's just interesting to see.
Question 3. How has Crystal evolved with your music style?
When I first made Crystal was very sci-fi oriented, and you can see that looking back on my Instagram and whatnot. Very, very sci-fi oriented, both from her style of dress to, her environments and whatnot. And then as I, got more into the classical stuff, obviously her style of dress changed. It was much more classical, much more present day. She started to be pictured with violins and all these other instruments. And then as I started to move away from a rigid sound, and branch out, a few odd things happened. The first one being unintentional. Her entire facial structure changed. And this was something that I noticed recently looking back. At the time, no knowledge of it. Why it changed, I don't know. Might have been that she just didn't have the kind of the look that I was going for the new idea or whatnot. I don't know. It was unintentional, but it definitely happened. The other big change, which was intentional, was that she started to be a bit more, how do I even put this? A bit more deranged looking, to be perfectly honest. A bit more chaotic. There's even some photos that are very much abstract of her like cracking and turning into like these spindles of like thread. It's hard to explain. It kind of stopped being so much a human as it did a concept and again a face. And that was kind of the direction that I wanted her to go originally, but it definitely took some steps to going there and kind of branching out of the rigid sound that I had put myself in kind of opened up that door for me to be a bit more abstract and experimental.
And number 4, you've been in a hiatus for about a year now. What was the reason for the hiatus and for coming back now?
Okay, that's a loaded question. Gosh, you could do a podcast episode just about that. Good going, Al, really, when you pick these questions. Phenomenal. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So the main reason behind it, there were 2 reasons. The first one being my music, because of the pandemic and lockdowns and whatnot, I was in my studio 8 hours a day, pretty much every day a year for about 3 or 4 years in a row. So, I was starting to get burnt out, and I'm honestly impressed that I made as much music as I did that still stayed somewhat fresh. But I was getting very burnt out. My music was getting sloppier. I was not putting as much effort into each individual piece. Pieces were becoming meaningless. They were just there just to fill in space. It just didn't have the same level of interest and creativity. And that was the first reason, was that just I needed a break. I needed to relax, get to know human beings again, because again, being in the studio 8 hours a day, I didn't actually go out and see people much. So it was just, I get to know people again, come out of hibernation, and just kind of get back to the other aspects of life. The other reason was mental health related, which was just, I'm a musician, I'm a producer. Are any of us okay? Probably not. So, that's just to be expected. So it was kind of a combination of those two that pushed the hiatus, and coming back now, I definitely see a difference, and I see a difference in creativity and whatnot. And I got a couple songs coming up that I haven't released. One's titled Playing God and the other one's titled Foolish. And those two are definitely some of the most creative pieces of music I've ever made. So there was certainly a benefit to taking the time off, because it allowed me to come up with some fresh ideas, start to expand and explore different sounds and cultures. I started to play with bringing in different cultural scales into my music and stuff like that. So it just, the reasoning for it was more so I could just take a break, unwind, calm down, and then refocus myself in the direction I wanted to go.
Question 5. Your new song, Be Not Afraid, which was almost like a surprise release as there wasn't as much promo as what you usually did in the past. What's the meaning behind your latest single?
Well, you got it right. There wasn't much promo. And it was as much of a surprise to me as it was to everyone else. The 2 tracks prior to it, the Clockmaker's Laboratory and the Gates to Eternity, those 2 had a ridiculous amount of promo each. They had like 2 weeks each. And the reasoning behind that was just, I wasn't releasing much. A release was a bigger deal than it typically was. I'm going to milk it, basically. And Be Not Afraid was made in about a month. Like, it was a big project, and it was a passion project for me. It took a lot of the sounds that I had used in the past, and with the stuff I had learned now, how to use them better and mix better and have more elements, converging and convolging into all these weird textures. I wanted to just make something for me. And then when I finished it, I thought about how people had been requesting, because neither The Gate to Eternity nor The Clockmaker's Laboratory, neither of those are particularly energetic songs at all. One's more of a soundscape and the other one's a bit more of a groove. So I thought, you know what? This one's really, really energetic. I'm just going to put it out there. Just going to put it out. Don't even care. Not going to announce it. Just throw it out there. And it was received really well, which I'm happy about. The meaning behind it was, honestly, not a whole lot. You could ask me about any other release and I could tell you a deep meaning about it pretty much, even if it doesn't have lyrics. This one, not really. Again, it was a passion project. But if I had to say a meaning, Be Not Afraid was chosen more just because, of the whole mental health stuff that I'd been dealing with and whatnot, and getting over those fears. It just was the first thing that came to mind when I was trying to think of, what to call it and what to say for the pre-drop. So not a whole lot of deep meaning behind this song in particular, but it was just something fun that I made just as a bit of a little passion project, as I keep saying. Was never meant to be released, ever. And kind of surprised it's done as well as it has, because it's so over the top at times, but it's done outrageously well.
Your most popular song for a while now has been Try, featuring Halia. How has this song being your top for so long affected you when you release new music?
It's funny. I've known Halia now for so long. She and I go back 3-4 years. And when she and I met, we were both at the very beginning of our careers. And Halia has since blown up. Shout out to her. She's done amazing. She's working now with huge artists, and I'm beyond proud of her and what she's achieved. But Halia and I worked for a very, very long time on Try, about 8 months. And it went through many, there's about 3 different versions of Try. And we were trying to originally make this darker, more mysterious, more moody, slower vibe. Wasn't working. We worked on it for about 5 months. Finally, I laid down these happier chords, which is rare for me because I typically like to work in minor. And I asked her, can you sing it maybe a bit more lighthearted, a bit more adventurous? And she did. And that's the final take. That's the take that's on the record. And it worked really, really well. And in terms of it being my most popular, it doesn't really bother me. I don't make music for the views or anything like that. So it's never really bothered me much. In fact, I think it's kind of cute, to be honest, because it shows that it's a piece of my history as an artist that people still enjoy and 3 years later still listen to. It still gets streams pretty much every day. So it's really cool to see. It's an interesting song, and I think the reason why it did so well is because it's a bit more melodic, a bit more mainstream, a bit more happy-go-lucky, which I should be taking little hints from and go, oh, this is what sells. I don't plan to, but I acknowledge it. And it's a fun song overall, and whenever I perform live, it gets played at least once, if not several times, because people love it. It's fun. So I have no problem with it doing as well as it has. In fact, I'm really happy that it has, because it was a big part of developing who I am as an artist, and I believe it's the same for Hylia.
Question 7. In the past, you've done some performances with your music. If you were to do that again now, how would you go about performing your more recent songs?
Well, I actually do have a performance coming up soon, which is really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. I have a lot of stuff laid out that is, as mentioned previously, a bit more orchestral as well as more theatrical, with me going into voice acting and doing my own voice acting on my music. So the sets are going to be less focused on constant energy and more focused on creating an environment and stuff like that. And that's very much the direction I want to go, is pushing sound to its limits on what it can make you feel, what it can make you imagine, what it can make you, visualize. And I think moving forward, that's going to be the direction that most of my performances take is yes, it's going to be energetic. Yes, there's going to be high energy moments, but there's also going to be slower moments. And there's going to be moments that are, maybe just talking and stuff like that. So very much more alternative, experimental, a little bit of everything, which could be exciting, might work, might not. I honestly don't know yet. But I am certainly excited to see how people take it and how it's received by my community, because it's not something that I've seen a whole lot of artists do, especially not someone who originally came into the industry advertised as a club artist.
Question 8. What's something or someone that inspires your music and why?
Well, I have a lot of inspirations, and they've changed a lot over the years. I tend to not listen to the type of stuff I make, which is kind of weird, because I do enjoy what I make, but I don't listen to it in my free time. I listen to a lot of blues, I listen to a lot of rock, I listen to a lot of jazz, soul, R&B, that sort of stuff. And one kind of point that I have to make is most of my inspirations now aren't so much inspirations on my sound as much as they are inspirations on their procedures in writing music and their branding and stuff like that. One of the biggest inspirations would be Kaleo, which is a Icelandic band. Most people know them for their single Way Down We Go, which was one of their first songs they ever released. Like Try, still their most popular, by far, by like a value of 10. And Kaleo is a band I've listened to now for several years, and the way they carry themselves and the way they market themselves and record and mix and just everything about how they make their music is so raw and in the moment and pure, and it's not artificial. It's not, it feels live, and that's what I like about that is kind of the live feeling. You're right there with them while they sing the song. It's just this really warm, inviting sort of vibe, and that's one of my biggest inspirations is trying to make your song sound like something it isn't. Make your song sound alive. Make it sound like it's, it's choosing where it's going to go, sort of thing. Not that it's this rigid set path. And that's something I've tried to experiment with a lot and failed miserably at. But it's certainly a fun idea, and it's something that I want to explore more, because it can bring a lot of life and a lot of interest into one's music.
Question 9. If it's been a bit since you've done a collaboration with another artist, is there any artist you'd want to collaborate with in the near future?
Yes. Interestingly enough, honestly, no, not really. And I'm not against collaborations, and I certainly plan to work with other artists. But I'm not so much searching them out as I was. The reason being is I have all these ideas that are very... How does one put this? Not standard and unconventional. And I find that a lot of artists typically are kind of like, why are you doing this? No. And it's just a shackle that's not needed. And I just find with the direction I'm going, a lot of the times there's a lot of disagreements, a lot of arguments about something, and it just doesn't work because I want to experiment. They want to do something that's a bit more crowd friendly, and that tends to be a bit of an issue when you're working on something and you're trying to make it sound like one consecutive piece. You get these two ideals and they just clash and nothing works. It just doesn't work. And I think moving forward, it's going to be very, very different in how I collaborate and who I collaborate with. I think I'm going to be more, if looking for any collaborations, more looking for people that are outside my realm of music and people that come from very different backgrounds, very different talents and skills, just people that do different things.
And lastly, at the moment, your songs Clockmaker's Laboratory and Be Not Afraid are fighting in my mind for being my favorite songs by you. How do you come up with your current style and decide to just go for releasing new music in said style?
ADHD. To be perfectly blunt, it's completely ADHD. I know so many people that have, everyone has their different ways of writing music. And I know a lot of people that have the, air quotes, normal way of writing music, which is, they suddenly get an idea. They're out and about. They go home. They write it down like a brief demo of it, and then they elaborate upon that. I've never been like that. I have to be different, apparently. I just sit down and I start placing notes randomly. And all of a sudden, a couple notes will work together, and I have a whole song idea in my head. And then I just put the pieces in as they go. And so I'm very much, I guess you could call it like a freelance writer. I just write freely. There's no like barriers in place or anything like that. I just write as I go. And that can prove to be troublesome in some instances because there's a distinct lack of planning, but it can also create some really interesting effects and results. As for, choosing what songs to release, I've always asked myself this question, if another artist that I listen to released this song, would I put it on my playlist? And if the answer is no, it's not good enough. My basis for release is that I have to enjoy it. I've never released a song because it's like, I don't like it, but someone else will. It'll get views, it'll get streams. No, I've never done that. Maybe I should. Maybe that's why I don't get as many streams as other people I know. I don't know, but I always, unless I enjoy the song, I don't release it at all. So that's typically my main process, is just to try and make something that I like, that fits my ear, and something that I was always told was, if you like it, there are other people out there that will like it as well.
Thank you so much, GOOGGZ, or Crystal, for coming back on the podcast. I wish you the best of luck with your newest single, Be Not Afraid, and with any new releases you have in the future.
Please.
Does it sound okay?
Thank you, Shanice. No, it doesn't. It sounds horrible. Now shut up.
If you didn't listen to that
Yappa,
episode
yappa, yappa.
way back in season 1, don't worry, I'll be introducing them. I've been
Goody.
creating wonderful music in this industry for about 4 years now. Our
Indubitably,
first single,
yes, of
Man's
course.
Best Friend, was released.
Please
and
kindly do not
kickstarted
listen to it.
GOOGGZ's
It's
music
garbage.
for coming back on
Yappa,
the
yappa,
podcast.
yappa,
I wish you the
yappa.
best of luck with your newest single, Be Not Afraid, and with any new releases you have in the future. If you like this episode, be sure to give us a like on YouTube, and if you're listening on Spotify, do whatever Spotify lets you